Hi guys, Stuart from the Film Reelcast. I'm back again with another review we've got from our vault. This time it's 1997 sci-fi horror Event Horizon. A really enjoyable but very scary, intense film with a huge cast. With Larry Fishbone, Sam Neill, Jolie Richardson, Sean Pertwee, Jason Isaacs, Richard T. Jones, a huge cast. It's a really enjoyable film to watch. The podcast was really good to talk about. I totally recommend it. It is available currently in the UK on Amazon Prime. Whether it will be where you are, I'm not too sure. But if hunt it down, try and get a copy and watch it and listen to this review. Remember, it's an audio podcast, so there's no video. Sit back, chill out, and enjoy. Remember, find us on iTunes, find us on Android. We're on all good podcasting platforms. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave comments, and I hope you enjoy the content. You take care. We'll be back very soon. Thank you.
And welcome back to the Film Reel Cast, where we have the sequel of What Happens to the Man from Jurassic Park, and we have the origin story of Neo's best friend from the Matrix, Morpheus. Event Horizon. Stu.
Hello, mate. How you doing? You good?
Very good.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, Event Horizon. Yeah, it's a film that we put out on Twitter ages ago. I think it was Twitter, Mortal Kombat, and what was the other one? What's that one about the killer whale called?
Blackfish.
Yeah, Blackfish.
It's interesting that you put Mortal Kombat because this and Event Horizon are both directed by the same person.
Exactly. Yeah, and everyone voted for this, which I was quite surprised. It was Mortal Kombat a long way, and then I say the last couple of hours, it changed to Event Horizon. But as you say, yeah, directed by Paul Anderson in 1997. And written by Philip Eisner. Paul Anderson did Shopping, which I watched the other day, which is really violent with this is Jude Law and what's that? Frost? Is it Sophie Frost? Is it? Birdie married, I think, didn't he?
I haven't seen Shopping. I've seen Mortal Kombat and I've seen Event Horizon. What I'd like to say,
all the Resident Evil films.
Yes, and that's where Paul W. Anderson, in my opinion, became unstuck.
Well, yeah, I mean, he did. That's where he met Mila Jovovich, whatever her name is, and yes. Yeah, he did all of them in 2002 onwards, and then he kind of did Aliens versus Predator.
Oh dear.
And then he did Death Race 1 and 2, so his career has kind of gone downhill. But
it's a massive shame.
He started off. It is a massive shame because he's absolutely brilliant, and thankfully, it started off with Mortal Kombat, which gave him the backing, and Paramount approached him to actually do this off the back of Mortal Kombat, and he really wanted to do an 18, and he's a massive Aliens fan. So, the direction of this, first of all, when he got the script, was like a monster in space, but because Alien had been done already then, I don't know what year, you're an Alien fan, aren't you? I don't know what year the first one was done.
70s. Was the first one, and then 80s was Alien. But I mean, I think especially the way the things are shot, especially the first half of this film, I think it's very, very difficult not to compare it to Alien.
Yeah, very much so. And it's a mixture of Alien, and there's a real presence of Hellraiser as well in this, which I watched the other day. I don't know if you've seen Hellraiser, but it's very much on script with that, with regard like the Cenobite monsters in Hellraiser, and the torture that they do is similar to the flashbacks that are seen. I mean, I saw the making of this on YouTube and the interviews with the cast. Like
yes,
Jason
I saw
Isaacs.
that. The link you sent me.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And there's just so much to this film in the background. I mean, it was filmed at Pinewood Studios, all in England, on the same stage as 007 in their massive shed they've got there, and like the wire works, the cost of the wire works. I mean, this film, the budget was 60 million, and looking at the figures, it kind of bombed at the cinema a bit, but it was only when he went home video. But I think
on a budget, and that thing mentioned, they did it all in about 10 months, which for like the sci-fi flick, and for the budget, even considering it was the late 90s, 97. well, mid to late 90s, yeah. I thought what they managed to do, especially the amount of practical effects they had, except I think was amazing when you actually consider the budget for the budget they had. I mean, you look at films, for example, like Jurassic Park, which would have had a much bigger budget with equally, I'd say, special effects, etc. And what they've managed to do on not quite a shoestring budget, I think you've got to give them a massive amount of credit, considering also the fact they had 10 months to do it, so there wasn't really too much preparation, was very limited as well.
Yeah, exactly. And when you compare it to other films that have bombed, which have got a much bigger budget on there, and all the interview and the facts that kind of go with this, such as the Event Horizon, was like the design of the spaceship was taken from pictures of Notre Dame Cathedral in France, and a lot of the internal layout and the stained glass window effects do appear on the Event Horizon. And as I say, the Event Horizon they've got the name as it's a boundary or theoretical boundary around a black hole, which is very much a part in this film. And also when they interviewed Lawrence Fishburne and Jason Isaacs about the spacesuits, they were saying that they weighed 30 kilograms each, and they had to have special chairs made because they were just too heavy to sit down in a normal chair, and had to have these chairs with virtual hooks on where they could just stand and rest in between filming.
Oh my God.
Facts around that, and the use of magnetic boots when actually land on the Event Horizon was just due to the fact that the wire work was so draining and it took so long to do that they just cut all of that out with the fact the idea of magnetic boots once they get onto the spaceship. And also the honesty, I liked Paul Anderson, where he says that he was given the script off the back of Mortal Kombat, and Paramount were rushing him to kind of, as you said, the 10 months to film this. That originally it was 130 minutes long rather than 95, and that he kind of wasn't bullied, but he felt the peer pressure being a young new director to rush the filming and take instructions from Paramount rather than launch the extended version, a director's cut, which the film sadly got lost in I think it was a salt mine, some remote country, where they've lost all the extra kind of archive footage, so there can't be a director's cut.
That is a massive shame.
He said he said looking back that he wished that he did do it the way he wanted to do it and put in the bits he wanted to do it, but because he was new and Paramount was so big and given him this responsibility, he felt obliged to take guidance from them, which he now regrets.
I mean, it's interesting because it's not the first. I mean, we could probably do almost a separate podcast, a series of them, on the amount of times that the production company have completely messed up a film.
Yeah, and this is a perfect example of that, because this film, with the extra footage in there, I mean, on YouTube, there's a few cut scenes that aren't really relevant, but it kind of adds, there's a lot of kind of character arc with regards to the different crew members, and also what they wanted to add in was the effects from the torture scenes from the original ones from the Event Horizon, and also the visions of the current crew who are on there, but because they were so graphic that they were told that it just can't get launched on the current scenes that he's putting in there, because they were just so horrid. And when he shows photographs of them, it's very much like Hellraiser. It's absolutely awful. It really is pretty grim. But nowadays, I suppose, because the threshold is so different, that you could actually just launch it, but I don't think people would mind, really. I mean, things have changed so much, haven't they?
They have. But I mean, I know that the documentary that we both saw mentioned that they wanted it. At some point, they wanted a PG-13 movie. I mean, they were just obsessed with. Hello, dog. How are the dogs? All good?
They're really good. Yeah, I think there must be something in the garden that's actually making Molly go mental.
Well, it's good to know. It's good to know she's protecting her family, Stu.
Well, exactly. Being a pain in the backside, and I'm sure the neighbours are loving us.
But yeah, I completely forgot what I was saying now on that tangent.
You were saying what a good bloke I was, and you can't believe I'm that good looking. I'm not a model.
I've always thought that. I've always thought that anyway. I mean, if this podcast had subtitles, that's going through my head throughout the whole hour we review every film.
No, we were just talking about how violence is kind of more accepted in a.
Oh, it is, isn't it? Yeah, but even to this day, as a PG-13, which will probably be over here at a 12A, equivalent to it's a 12, but you've got to see it with an adult potentially, or just a 12. I think it's even today though, but by today's standards, they're limited the violence. It would not work because you needed that horror, especially in the second half. Particularly they used it from the middle all the way to the end, the horror and the quite gory horror as well. For the hell dimension, etc.
Yeah, I've never seen Mortal Kombat. Have you seen that? I know you like those kind of films.
It's like a 12, basically. It's nothing. It's nothing like the game in terms of there's no gruesome fatalities because the studio are quite clever. They know kids play the games, even though they probably shouldn't. Even though it's got it should be maybe for the more mature audience, but they realised kids in this respect for Mortal Kombat was their audience, and they made a film for that. Which at the time, many say it was the best video game movie made, much better than Street Fighter, and it actually followed the game, the brief story of the game, as closely as it realistically could have done, with making it a film. And ultimately, it had characters that you probably cared way more about. I mean, if you compare Mortal Kombat to Street Fighter, and I know you're passionate about Street Fighter, it's almost Oscar-worthy compared to Street Fighter. Not that it's it's still not the best film in the world, but compared to Street Fighter, it's massily better. It's probably the way of putting it.
It's not difficult though, is it? I mean, you made me watch Street Fighter, and that's something that I'll never forget.
Ah, well, there we go. Go.
Yeah, but the film, back to Event Horizon. Yeah, it starts with the in 2015. I always find it quite interesting, especially when you watch films like Terminator and things like that, of the visions that people have, what things will be like in 2015,
and how the human race has just disappointed them.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much so. Yeah, I mean, none of them put Donald Trump to be president, but yeah, it says in 2015, the first permanent colony established on the moon. I mean, that was quite interesting because we've got obviously the space station, but apart from that, we're nowhere near establishing any kind of life on any planet, are we?
No, not really. No, unfortunately.
And it says in 2032, a commercial mining began on Mars, which I doubt that'll ever happen in my lifetime. And it says in 2040, research ship Event Horizon, which explores the boundary of the solar system, it vanished beyond Neptune, which was recorded as the worst space disaster. And then it comes up to present time, which is 2047. And the first character you're really introduced to is Sam Neill.
Yes.
And we find out, the inventor of the core machine that's on the Event Horizon spaceship. And he's dreaming of a female who we don't kind of realise who that is yet, do we? Until later on.
No, but I mean, I think, and in a good way, it kind of lets the audience decide itself. It gives credit to the audience by not spoon feeding them the information you need at the time, where you can kind of put two and two together and you can really work out who that is yourself until who that female is. I mean, you get it confirmed later on, which is I think quite a brave thing from the director and the story to give that credit to the audience, because so many films potentially wouldn't nowadays. They all think the audience is thick and they need to spoon feed the details and not have them work it out for themselves. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but before we kind of really get into this, I mean, we didn't speak about the cast. It's got Sean Pertwee, who I actually love, a brilliant British actor. He really is. He plays Smith. Lawrence Fishburne, who I always think of, and I normally slag him off. I shouldn't really, because he's quite entertaining, but Lawrence Fishburne is a much better version of Samuel Jackson in my book. He plays Captain Miller. You've got Jolie Richardson, who's Lieutenant Stark, Sam Neill, who's Dr. William Mear, Kathleen Quinlan, who plays Peters, Richard T. Jones plays Cooper, Jason Isaacs is DJ, and Token Gesture, Jack Nosworthy, or Noseworthy, is Justin. And then after the Sam Neill, it then goes to the spaceship, which I do love the name of, the Lewis and Clark spaceship, which we find out is the search and rescue spaceship. And apart from, obviously, Sam Neill's character, the rest of them are on that search and rescue spaceship who have been sent out. And we find out that they've had their kind of leave of absence cancelled to go on this mission, which kind of sets them to be pretty anti anyway, even before they've met Sam Neill. And I've throughout all of this, I mean, I like Sam Neill. I think he's a really good actor, and he's always very kind of straight-laced, isn't he, whatever he's been in. And when they did the interviews, I always find it interesting to find out what these people are like in real life. And apparently he's just constantly taking the piss out of everyone, and he's a real joker, isn't he?
Yeah, you wouldn't. You know what? Through his roles, The Omen, you know the later Omen series, which he was in, Jurassic Park, which is known for, and this one, which I've seen him in, never would have guessed that at all.
No, he just seems quite uptight, but that's what I like when you get the behind-the-scenes things, when you find out that these people are the complete opposite of the characters, which are often kind of portrayed on the screen.
Yeah.
And so it starts off with all the crew in like a hypersleep. And whilst Sam Neill was in hypersleep, he's awoken because he hears female voices again. It's the same female voice which was calling to him at the start of the film. And he does something that I would never do. He kind of wakes from his hypersleep, and then he goes to explore where these female voices are coming from. And instantly this film sets the tone really, really early on. And this is only about 15 minutes into it, where he goes onto the bridge, and there's a female sitting in the pilot's seat. And you know for a fact, just by this film and by the music and the way, the tone of this film, that when that chair turns around, it's going to be something pretty horrific, don't you?
Yes.
And they don't disappoint. The chair turns around, and it's a female called Claire, who I believe is his either girlfriend or his wife, who was on the Event Horizon. And she turns around in the chair, and she has no eyes whatsoever. She's just as hollow as where her eyes are. She says that I'm waiting to him. Which you kind of, there's a similar message from her and from different crew members who get affected by the core and what happens in this film. And when I first watched this, it really, I watched this when it came out. I probably watched it, must have been 2000 or maybe 2000, 1999, something like that. I remember this film being a lot longer, I thought it was, but being really, really scary and kind of on the edge of your seat jump. And it didn't disappoint. It got me straight back into it.
Yeah, I mean, we're introduced to Sam Neill's character very well, but the only negative, I think, about the first half of the film, which I thought was really, really solid, was, and once again, comparing it to Aliens, but I don't know whether that's fair, Aliens, sorry, or even Aliens, the first Aliens film, is I felt that we should have explored the characters a tiny bit more, so we potentially cared about them more with what ultimately happened to some of them. And I also felt that the writing of the characters, they were, I mean, like unlike Alien, you didn't feel like they were tropey as such, but in this one, they almost seem to fit certain different stereotypes. I don't know. Did you think I'm being slightly unfair on the film? I mean, you had the cocky black guy, yeah, you know, who's was almost a trope in Hollywood cinema. Obviously, back in the 90s, they had Lawrence Fishburne's character, who was reminded me of almost of the sergeant, lieutenant, whatever, out of Aliens. You know, the tough guy. But because we didn't really, I felt like we didn't explore them too much. And other than Sam Neill and Lauren and obviously Fishburne, we knew very, very little about them. Obviously, you had the mum that cared about her child, etc. We didn't really know we didn't really know the whole cast really, really well. So when things did happen, I felt like, okay, maybe I should have cared more about it.
Yeah, I can understand I can see it from a certain point of view.
Because like
I
in
think
Alien, they had
it's-
that scene where they were all having breakfast and stuff together, and they were doing stuff together, which, you know, on the face of it, when you try and explain it to somebody, it was boring. But the way it was shot and the conversations they were having, which were not prevalent to the plot as such, but it just gave you a lot more information about the universe, about them. It almost looked like a Big Brother. You're just watching these people, you know, have breakfast. And we didn't really get that too much of that at all. That's what I'm saying. Sorry, Stu.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was pretty quick into it. I mean, they meet Neil, Sam Neill's character, and then they're put in hypersleep, and he tries to explain what the machine is on the event horizon, and then they pretty much find the event horizon, and that's it. Yeah, there's not much of a character arc, but then again, we don't know what was left out of the film, what Paramount thought was useful and noteworthy, and what wasn't. I mean, there could have been similar scenes in that, or maybe he didn't want to go so close to the to Alien,
Maybe.
and people just associate it with that. As in, if he did a very similar kind of breakfast scene, that people would just be saying, "Well, this is just a rip off of Alien," and they'd lose the whole concept of what was actually happening. I don't know.
No.
But I mean, I'm glad in this film when Sam Neill explains the purpose of the event horizon. He obviously explains it in very scientific terms, and thankfully the crew are about as clever as I am, where he has to explain it in the kind of layman's terms. And what the ship does is it can move from one point to another in space, in the flick of an eyelid, which obviously can't be done. But the way it does it is it folds space, and he kind of mirrors it to a piece of paper, where if you want to go from one point to the other point on a piece of paper, rather than do a straight line, you fold the piece of paper, you get to that point, and then space opens up, and that they don't actually know where this ship's been, do they?
No.
So, and we find out later on where the ship's been, which is quite horrific. But so he explains the purpose of the ship being somewhere that explores space on the outer rims of places where no one's been.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right with the characters, but I figured it was so fast moving, being only an hour and just over an hour and a half,
Okay.
that there was kind of non-stop action, and it didn't give you enough time to care about them. I mean, in hindsight, yeah, it's a bad thing, but
So what you're saying, potentially it might be a bad thing, but then what you kind of like reading between the lines is it could also be viewed as a good thing because it helps move the plot along at quite a pace.
Yeah.
Which you know I can argue is not necessarily, you know, on the other side of the coin. Essentially, if you're not going to do the character development, it moves the plot along. So there's very little standing here. Okay, what's exactly going on here, kind of stuff.
yeah.
Okay,
It was
I
just
get you.
yeah, this is that person either going to live or they're going to die, and you can see what they're like by their actions. You can tell they're a close crew.
Yes.
And that was enough for me, if you see what I mean. I didn't need lots of chat. That's one thing sometimes in Alien that I don't like, is when they're sitting around chatting so much. I like the chase of the alien and being hunted by the alien. That's when I find it really exciting, and this film had that for me, even though there wasn't an actual monster chasing them.
Yeah.
I just like the pacing. But yeah, so and as you say, that as you're going through, you see kind of where they're scanning the crew, just filming around. Peters is watching a video on a tablet of her son, which is quite relevant later on. And Sam, as I said earlier, Sam Neill explains the event horizon and what it actually does. And that's when they find the recording, which would instantly scare the shit out of me, of the crew. And it's only, at the moment, it's only an audio recording, but it sounds like a lot of screams and it's quite fuzzy. And DJ, Jason Isaac's character, just hears a word of Latin, which means save me.
Yeah.
And I like that because it was very simple. It was done really, really well. It wasn't a difficult storyline to follow, but it got you involved straight away, that you knew something was going to happen. And I don't need any more than that, to be honest.
No, and I thought the use of the Latin rather than everything else was simply, for me, it was quite significant because, for example, like The Exorcist and other films, you know of that nature, it kind of pointed you in the direction of, okay, this is a sci-fi, but almost more of like a classic horror demon hell kind of thing, rather than potentially aliens. That's like the clue. That was for me the first big clue it gave me as to where the film was ultimately going to lead.
Yeah, yeah, and it kind of it doesn't drop that like ball all the way through the film. And when they get on to the event horizon, Peters is searching around, and it's a case of some of the crew. I think Sam Neill and Jolie Richardson are watching what's happening, and she finds a corpse again. It's with no eyes floating around,
Which was pretty scary. I mean, there's one point when I think that when they went onto the event horizon, interestingly, the doors had the numeral numbers 13, didn't they? When it unlocked, which is, interesting. I don't know why. The thing is, I don't know why you'd have the number 13 etched onto there, but never mind. When the hand put on Lawrence Fishburne's character's shoulder, which kind of creeped me out. I was like, oh my god, the first time, And also, what I really liked about the Frozen. The frozen dead person was you saw they had a really wonderful shot of a facial shot I always think it's rude saying facial because it's always, but never mind. Yeah, so apologies, but obviously, yeah, the female character, and then you had that silhouette black thing in the background, kind of like going past you. So what I thought was really good, you knew something was there, and rather than ruin like the jump shot, I thought that added to it because you knew something was there. You weren't too sure what, and rather than play with your head, the next thing you saw was obviously what was behind straight away, and it looked quite horrifying.
Yeah, it was quite terrible, wasn't it?
Yes,
and then they turn the gravity on, don't they?
They did.
And then you see the body, that floating body, fall down to the ground and it shatters.
Yes.
And it's quite interesting because apparently when they filmed this, and the guy who did a lot of the props, he must have been quite a disgruntled employee because he placed a doll inside the corpse, which they didn't realise it can only be seen after the actual final footage of when the body shatters on the floor. You can see a doll, and they had to cut away from that when they finally kind of released the film. So, which would have been a big finger up from whoever did that.
He's probably quite proud.
Yeah, he must have been quite proud. Yeah, it's one up on him. But then Justin goes and finds the core gravity drive. And upon finding a core gravity drive, which is in the event horizon, it's again, the special effects aren't great in this, as in like the CGI. I mean, the makeup's flawless in this; it's absolutely brilliant. But the special effects do come across as being dated, especially when you've got items floating around in space. But Justin puts his hand in this what appears to be like this water, doesn't he? It's like a vapor.
Yeah.
And upon doing that, he gets sucked into this wall, and you find, from what we've been told, I believe he travels to a different dimension, doesn't he?
Yes, well, we've been told ultimately. I mean, at the time, you don't really know where he's gone.
No.
You just know, like, he's gone through this liquidy thing. There's nothing other. So it kind of reminded me of Stargate, almost.
Yeah, because it's like a massive orb with these rings around it, and when they all kind of align, that the core gravity drive is on, and it opens up a gate to another dimension, like an unknown dimension, and that's where Justin gets pulled into, unbeknown to the rest of the crew. But when they do pull him out, he's in a state of shock, and you find out later why he's in such a state of shock. And I think it's done so well. It's really, really simple. And again, it's so much in this film until you start finding out and things become more evident that you're left wondering why, and you want to know why. And because it's all quite horrific, isn't it? It's all really, really fast paced. I mean, he was pulled into that portal straight away. Then thankfully he was on a like a tow rope, and he was pulled out by, I think it's Cooper who pulls him out.
Yeah.
But he looks like he's seen something completely horrific, and you don't know whether he's in a coma or anything, but you realise that because of what he's witnessed, he's just in a complete state of shock, isn't he? He's comatose.
No, and I think that adds to the suspension, going forward, because we don't know what it is. This gravity's driving. The whole thing looks completely alien and out of this world, even though it was built by humans. Obviously, made to look like that on purpose. And knowing what we know now, the whole thing actually looks quite gothic almost, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's been labelled that a lot of times.
And what I also like is after that he'd obviously potentially see. He was in so much horror, and while there, obviously, his mate sees. I forgot from the top of my head what the guy that rescued also sees something, doesn't he? Which is out of the ordinary.
What Cooper?
Yeah.
Well, Cooper says that when he gets rescued, they bring him back, and the team have a bit of a debrief. And Cooper says that he pulled him out through this kind of vapor that was floating around. And Sam Neill, you instantly know that his character has got a hidden agenda because he explains what happened, and Sam Neill says, "Well, that's impossible because if that happens, it means the gate is open, and the gate isn't open."
Yes.
And he says that he was disillusional about the whole thing, that he's seeing things, and you don't know, and he's very vague when they ask him, "Well, could this happen? What's likely to happen?" And Sam Neill's instantly vague about all the facts, saying, "If I don't know, it can't be possible. I'm not too sure." And just walks away. When earlier he admitted to being the one who invented this this core drive, which is why he's come along on this this event, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And what I thought was nice about that scene that you were mentioning is the fact that obviously no one else saw it. Who do they believe? And Lawrence Fishburne's character said, "Look, it's clearly he saw something," and that's what I liked about it. Rather than all the crew saying, "No, you didn't see anything really," and which I thought was actually quite refreshing. And let's be honest, probably quite realistic in that kind of scenario. Rather than do the you didn't see anything, and then they have to find out for themselves. After not believing.
Yeah, I never kind of thought of it like that. That's a really good point. Yeah, Fishburne instantly sticks up for his crew, and
because it's tropey.
Yeah,
it's so tropey
he saw something. He saw something.
It's so tropey to do it the other way around, isn't it?
Yeah, and they could have easily dismissed it, and it wouldn't have been a poignant point in the film. So yeah, that's pretty spot on there. Well done to you, my friend.
Oh, thank you very much. You're very kind.
Thanking you. And after that, Peters finds a clearer video of the crew. When the gateway opens up, and they can hear screams, and it's kind of it's still not that clear of what's going on, but you can see a lot of kind of like bodies in there, and people screaming, and kind of begging, and sounds of people being tortured, which you find out what actually happens later on. And I do like the scene where. And again, it's another really freaky one, and it's made like that on purpose. Where Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill then go into the area where the orb drive is to find out if it's being powered and what's actually powering it, if it is actually on.
Yes.
And he goes into that green tunnel, doesn't he?
Oh god, that was quite a really creepy, kind of like pseudo claustrophobic scene. I thought that was horrible.
Yeah. And Anderson said he used that bright green because it is quite a disturbing colour, and that's what he was going for. And it's done so well, and it's the tension in this scene. He goes into Lawrence Fishburne waits outside, and Sam Neill goes inside to check some circuitry and to find what is powering it, the drive, if anything is. And it's a bright, luminous green. And whilst he's inside, the lights go on and off, and he hears voices, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And it's Claire calling again, and it's just fucking awful. She's saying like, "Be with me," like, "Come here," and I just expected every time the light went off and they went on again, I expected her to be behind him.
Which I think was the movie were almost like working as intended, so to speak, because I think it wanted you to be uneasy because you were waiting for. Eventually, it happened. Obviously, you saw it, but you were waiting for something to happen, and it didn't happen. Then you think it didn't happen again, and you had like several. It seemed like a long period, but of definitely several seconds, thinking, "Oh my god," and I thought it really kept you on edge, along with the green, all that green, which kind of reminded me of the Matrix almost. That green they used. Yeah, and I thought that was a really, really good scene. considering that must have taken quite a lot to set up, and in the grand scheme of things, that was quite a short scene for that amount of work in terms of footage and special effects. But I think that's one of the scenes that definitely paid off.
Yeah, and again, it's more, and this is my kind of horror that I like, where it's more psychological, where you don't actually have to see anything. It's just having seen other films and the way it's set up and the kind of the angle of the camera, the way it's filmed, and you normally see this in the films when you see like the kind of the star of the film, and it's kind of quite a wide pan angle. You know that someone's going to appear behind, and it was set up like that, but nothing actually ever happened until that kind of the tension went, and then you thought, well, maybe that they're just kind of playing with our minds, and then she appeared, and again, the fact that she's got no eyes, and it's quite horrible. And whilst he's in there, Lawrence Fishburne sees a burning figure appear from around the orb, and it's a male who's walking on water, and you don't know why this happened. And again, he kind of opens up to the crew that he saw this. Then a lot of the other crew members open up about the kind of the things that they've seen, and they realise that they're not just hallucinations, that something on this ship which is evil, which is perhaps playing with their fears or previous incidents that have happened to them. And again, when they put this to Sam Neill, he tells them that they're all wrong and that they're just hallucinations and they're suffering from hypersleep possibly still and things like that. And he's shot down by all the crew, say that we've been on so many missions. These aren't hallucinations. We're all seeing them, but they're all different figures. And I love that because Sam Neill does it so well. He's so straight-faced, and he's not frightened just to shush a whole crew of people who are against him when the facts are against him as well.
Yeah, and it's probably end up going to be the main negative in the film for me when we do the best bits and worst bits. It's not the Sam Neill character. Is I really felt though that during this period of leading up to the ultimate finale, that kind of like middle third of the film, I really wanted them to explore, because they compared it almost to The Shining as well, didn't they, in that documentary?
Yeah.
I really wanted, as straight-laced as Sam Neill is, I really wanted to spend a bit more time with that character and watch him and have more of him slowly going crazy or going there, because we know he's lying, but it's almost like he's lying and then he's like being moderately, he's being quite naughty, but I wanted to see like a more explore more with him and see it like more progressively and spend more time with him. Maybe that would have like stopped the film, because as you said, it's quite a fast-paced film. Maybe that would have had a negative effect, but I felt like I wanted more of that. To fully explore the reasons why he's doing it, maybe the reasons why he thinks it. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know what you think about that, though, Stu.
Yeah, I mean, you do see every now and then, which I do like, is that when, say, like the core kind of does reset itself and realign, it seems to have some effect on Sam Neill, and you do get shots where it goes to Sam Neill's face like there's some kind of awakening or some message that only he can sense. So you do get that sense throughout the film. Like, for instance, when Justin's being sucked into like the orb, and when he gets like released from it again, you actually do see Sam Neill's face, and he's got like an expression as if a certain message is being sent to him, only him, from the orb on this spaceship. So you do get certain messages, but yeah, I do agree. And also when Sam Neill's kind of shitting on everyone's ideas, I thought it's quite interesting that DJ puts a knife to Sean Pertwee's throat.
Yes, definitely.
And I didn't know, because of the lack of kind of character arc in these characters throughout the whole crew, whether Jason Isaacs' character was quite violent and a bit of a nutcase, or whether this was the effect that the orb was having on him, and it was making him do things that he wouldn't normally do, because he picks a scalpel up and puts it to Sean Pertwee's throat when he starts having a moan at Sam Neill for like saying, "What have you got us into? You know a lot more."
Yeah.
I mean, what did you think of that?
I thought that was really good. I thought that was this is where as you already mentioned, the exploring the crew more, I felt would have come potentially more into play and had more of a payoff. But I thought that was quite a good scene because it showed that everyone was scared, and it kind of like and it was like the beginning of the end to ultimately what we saw, what happened to the other crew in the video where they were all killing themselves or killing each other, etc. And it was like almost like a homage to that, where you had this crew, this tightly knit group of friends, potentially starting to turn against each other. And this is the point where, for me, it all began to go wrong, and from then it just kind of like, well, it's going wrong anyway. But after that point, it was like someone hit a button and everything going wrong almost like accelerated at such a fast pace.
So did you put that down to fear on like Jason Isaacs' part, or did you put that down to like the ship having some kind of effect on him?
No, I put that down to fear. I put that down to sheer fear. However, I don't think the ship was directly having an effect on him. But I think I think what the ship was doing though was, you could argue, it indirectly had an effect, because had the ship not been doing that and everyone been so tense, he wouldn't have done that anyway. That's why I felt that was a human reaction to what was going on with everything.
Right, because I mean, as I was saying, the next scene is where Peters is alone in the medical bay, and Justin vanishes.
Yes.
And Peter runs away. She goes up onto the crew deck. She gets quite freaked out. And whilst they're locked inside the bridge, and this bit kind of was a bit puzzling for me. It wasn't really explained. They're locked in the bridge, and you've got the big iron doors there, and then there's like massive, like, I don't know if they're handprints or claw prints, start smashing onto the metal doors, leaving kind of marks in the doors as if like a massive monster's out on the outside. And Sam Neill gets up in like a trance-like state and says, "We need to open the doors." And Jolie Richardson's the only one who stops him from doing it. And that kind of, for me, I would have liked that explained a bit more.
Yeah, it was kind of like a scene that at some point definitely needed an answer, but we didn't quite get it. We didn't really ultimately have for me, there wasn't a satisfactory conclusion on what was doing that. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
Because the ship works on people's fears, doesn't it?
Yes.
Like, and people's own individual fears. And for them to be some kind of big monster pounding on that door, leaving like kind of handprints and paw prints or whatever it was on the other side of the door due to the force, but we don't know what was causing that. It's just really strange, because a lot of the deaths in this film are kind of through people's own fault and kind of psychological, led into traps. But this appeared to be not the case, did it?
No. I didn't really realise how almost out of place. That's a kind of maybe a bit unfair. It wasn't obviously until you mentioned it, because when you actually look at it from the film, it just seemed to be this random not even that random, segment of the film that was really creepy and was quite good. But I think once he finished the film and now we're talking about it, it was almost like, had we seen the director's cut, there may have been a reason for this shot. But yeah, you left, I think, scratching your head.
Yeah. I mean, from that scene, I mean, Justin locks himself in an airlock, and I think this scene sets up the rest of the film brilliantly. And
this was one of the most scary scenes
I think
for me.
the acting's great.
Yeah, and really disturbing to watch.
What he says. Yeah, he says. He talks about being kind of the other side in the portal, and he says it shows horrible things. I won't go back there. If you've seen the things that I've seen, you wouldn't stop me. And then he kind of snaps out of that kind of trance and doesn't want to die, and he's rescued by Lawrence Fishburne. I mean, there's a hell of a lot of tension in this, but the fear alone on Justin's face, and by what he says, you get the feeling that what he's actually witnessed, or whatever it is, when he was on the other side of this portal, is absolutely horrific and sick and just beyond anyone's comprehension, don't you?
Yeah, and we get a clue of what he probably would have witnessed when, towards the end of the film, when Lawrence Fishburne has like a preview, kind of like a trailer of what was potentially going to happen, near the end of the film. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought it was done so well. The tension, the fact that you had the countdown, you saw his veins, which was that practical effect was really, really good. Start to pop out the blood from his eyes. And the way they built it up to that crescendo where he was saved just in time. But goodness knows what state he was in once they saved him, though. But that was for me. I think that was one of the most tense parts of the whole film.
Yeah, it was. It doesn't really make sense, but it was kind of slow. But due to the tension, it felt really, really fast. There was a hell of a lot of tension, a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
With regards to what he said, left you wondering: is he going to die? Is Lawrence Fishburne going to rescue him on time? And all of that together made for a brilliant scene. And yet again, after that scene, they asked Sam Neill about the darkness, which Justin refers to. And he says it's nonsense. He says he was delusional. He's going through it was the pressure of the airlock and what was happening to him, and that there's nothing actually happening. But beforehand, that Sam Neill's already kind of played his card, because as Justin wakes up, that's when you get the flash to Sam Neill's face as if something's calling him.
Yes.
Which is the orb in the spaceship. So we know that Sam Neill has got a hidden agenda already, and that the crew know as well. Lawrence Fishburne, whose character is absolutely brilliant, he instantly knows there's something wrong and Sam Neill can't be trusted, and that they want to get off the ship. And I think it's great. And that's when, from this scene, Fishburne has a vision of his crewmate who he left behind on a previous mission, and his crewmate's kind of on fire. And straight after that vision, he kind of has flashes, very, very quick, but I think they're his own crew's faces, and some of them are wrapped in barbed wire with their eyes open, or their eyes out, and they're all covered in blood, aren't they? And he knows that something's wrong, because he even says something like, "God help us," doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Which he pretty admits that they're all fucked. And I should imagine he comes across as someone who's seen horrible things on previous missions and rescue missions, that even by the look on his face in this scene, that this is like something he's never seen before.
At any point in this film, did you feel that all the crew are going to die? I did. But did you?
Yeah, I thought that they're all going to die. I just thought the film was going to be, they're all going to die and they're going to float away, and at the end of it, another rescue mission will come, and it will kind of go in cycles, if you see what I mean.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Because I never like it when everyone dies. I always think the few times it was done, for example, in zombie films and stuff, it's okay, clever, original, but it just annoys me, and I normally feel like it's a lazy way of writing and concluding a film. It's for me, it's an unimaginative way. But when you mention obviously the cycle and stuff, I know obviously, spoiler alert, but then no one, they don't, as far as we're aware, they don't all die. But getting that feeling that they're all going to die, and that depressing feeling, I thought was really, really good, because normally you think, nah, they're not all going to die, etc. But I really felt, I really felt at this point, as you were explaining, and from then on, that was going to be the most likely scenario.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. And following on from what Fishburne says, and Fishburne's character is someone who doesn't kind of deal with fools lightly, and he's very much in control, and he's very professional as the captain of the ship. He's chatting with DJ, and he says that he believes the ship knows people's fears and secrets, and that they're all going to be in trouble, and at some point they're all going to have to face their own fears and the situation that comes with it. And DJ says that he's listened to the Latin, what you heard earlier, and that he got it wrong, and it's save yourself from hell. That's what he believes. So you're getting a lot of references, as you said earlier. It's quite gothic-y, it's like Hellraiser-y, that rather than going on to the science fiction side of things, it's kind of heaven and hell, save yourself from hell. And that really kind of confirms if you haven't got enough messages through this film already, that there is something really, really evil about this orb and the places it's visited.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So the crew from there watch a really nice home video of the previous crew, who a lot of them are kind of sodomizing other people. They're killing them,
Oh
they're eating
God,
them.
yeah.
Some of them are pulling their own eyeballs out. And the last shot of that video is the captain walking up to the camera, who you saw about half an hour ago look really happy, really looking forward to their next mission. He walks up to the camera and he's got each eyeball in each hand. And it's because it's a flick, because they had to cut a lot, but because it's very, very quick, it's quite horrific, isn't it? And it's really full on. I mean, there's people strapped to poles who are just naked, wrapped in barbed wire, with just blood dripping down their faces, and it's just awful, isn't it?
Yeah, and I know in the well, what could have been at some point the director's cut, but it wasn't. I know they had shot more footage there, but I like the way they did it. It's really, really quick shots to the point where you could kind of make out what was going on, but you couldn't, like, fully make out what was going on. But it was so disturbing, and I went to the next disturbing thing, and I thought the way it was done was really, really good. Rather than focus on it for a long time, one particular shot, it just kept chopping and changing and giving you so much information. And normally that's a bad thing, but I think in respect to this, I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah, and sometimes leaving some bits to the imagination of wondering what the hell was actually happening is often better, because your mind will play out such horrific scenarios. And upon seeing that, that's where Fishburne has finally had enough and says, right, what we're going to do is we're going to leave the event horizon. And he says, you can't leave it. He goes, well, don't worry about it. When we get far enough away, we're going to fire some missiles at it and blow the whole ship up. And upon this, which I really do like, the event horizon kind of, it's as if he hears what Lawrence Fishburne said and what the plans are. That he starts to drain power from the rescue ship.
Yes.
Which in the scenario plays out that because he's draining air and he's damaging the ship, the people have got no choice but to abandon their ship, the Lewis and Clark, and go on to the event horizon, because that's the only place that's got oxygen. And in doing that, trapping all the crew on the event horizon. And I really, really like that. It's a very kind of Amityville, isn't it? It's like a haunted house, and it's got control of all the people inside.
Yeah, and I like the way you compared it to Amityville. I mean, it was almost like more doom and gloom, and more questioning how they're going to get out, of this scenario, if at all. What's going to happen next?
Yeah, and again, the kind of photography of this is so good, because when Fishburne's having that conversation with Sam Neill, he's having it in one of those really, really long tunnels, which separate the lifeboat ship to the orb on the main event horizon. And Sam Neill, half of his face where he's standing is in the shadows.
Yeah,
and it really gives him a sinister look, because once he says he's going to blow the ship up, Sam Neill just walks backwards and he kind of vanishes into the darkness, and it looks really, really evil. And as I said earlier, he's kind of played his cards with regards to what side he's on, and it's just great. And it kind of carries on from there. The pace now is just so fast. I mean, the next one is Peter's again. She's in the medical bay. Why the fuck she's in the medical bay, I really, really don't know. And she has vision of her son, who's in this kind of tent with like maggots on his legs. And the son, she turns around and next she sees the son, and she follows him, and she's running around the ship. And again, it's very much like The Shining when you see the two kids on their bikes. You follow her running around the corridor looking at the sun. And again, very similar to The Shining. Mm-hmm. There's something about children in horror films which is quite spooky and terrifying.
Yeah,
I don't know whether that's just me or not.
Yeah, no, I thought my other half exactly the same gets really, really freaked out when anything involving children. So yeah, no, I completely agree. Following, because nothing, that sun's not really there. Nothing's good going to happen, and sometimes you think, well, that's it'd be nice once again to explore the characters more and how much she cares about her son. We know obviously she does, being a mum, but why follow that? For example, because and maybe once again exploring the characters more may have given an answer. I don't know. But then obviously she does follow it, which is ultimately to her demise.
Yeah, she falls down a massive shaft and ends up in the area where the ship's core is.
I don't know how.
I
don't know how she ends up in the area because she falls down the shaft. But where the shaft is, where I thought it was relative to where the ship's core is, there are two completely different places. And for me, it just made. I just thought she. For me, it was almost like she materialised there. I know we didn't see her do that, but she just ended up there, and I thought. Because I found it difficult to know where she was in relation to the shaft. It didn't make that much sense to me. I don't know about you.
I don't know. I just, as you say, because she was kind of running around the corridors, you got a bit lost with regards to any direction that she was going in.
That's true. That's true.
And I suppose because it was the ship's core that was making her do this, maybe it was only right that she actually fell down and she died next to it. And Sam Neill it just comes in there and sees her on the floor. And for an instant second, he shows a bit of concern, which was quite surprising. And instantly from there, again, he hears voices of Claire saying sorry and like follow me. And he has a vision of going into a bathroom, and he sees Claire. And she's naked in the bath.
Yes.
And you see her cut her own wrists with the cutthroat razor that Sam Neill was using earlier at the start of the film. And he's again saying, sorry, I left you. It wasn't my fault. Please don't blame me. And then he's in the bathroom and he starts to kind of gouge his own eyes. And then it flicks back to where he's next to the orb, which is turning, which means the gates are opening. And he's pulled his own eyeballs out, which again, it's a really horrific scene. And you understand why the other crew who have been found and why his wife now in previous visions doesn't have any eyeballs. Because he said where you're going, which reminded me of Back to the Future line and a little bit where we're going, you don't need roads. And he says where we're going, you don't need eyes. It's all about the sensation.
Yeah. And it kind of like bookended the beginning of the film and this part where Sam Neill completely delves into chaos, obviously by taking his own eyes out, and it completely explained, obviously, if you needed it, the fact that it was his girlfriend / wife. If you hadn't known, earlier, which I think most people would have done, but yeah. Yeah,
so what they decide to do is grab some oxygen from the event horizon in a way of trying to escape, and they kind of mention the explosives earlier. Sam Neill mentions the explosives in the long corridor, and what's happened is Sam Neill's removed a lot of explosives from the event horizon, and he's placed one in the rescue ship, and Sean Pertwee's in there, and he suddenly gets a message from Fishburne that says, get out when the explosives have moved. And this scene, I think Sean Pertwee he's a really good actor, and he has a real screen presence for me, and he does in a lot of films that he's in. And I really liked him. He was in Gotham, wasn't he?
Oh, he's brilliant.
He was absolutely brilliant in Gotham.
And he brings a new, and in Gotham, he brings a completely new Alfred we haven't really seen before, which I thought was, rather than try and copy, obviously, Michael Caine's, and the guy from the Batman and Batman Returns, the Michael Keaton days, he brings a completely new aspect to that, and really makes that character his own for Gotham. He's one of the best things about that show.
Yeah, he's real. In this, in Event Horizon, he's quite a cockney geezer. He's down to earth, and he says what he thinks. He doesn't care who it upsets. And when he's searching around in this bay for the explosive, and he pulls his cover back, and you see the explosive with blood on it. It's on a countdown to 4 seconds already. And it's just that look on his face where he just knows he's going to die. It's got the kind of worry, concern, sadness, horror, all mixed into one expression.
Yes. Yeah, that face was brilliant.
Yeah, and then it just blows it up. And you're fucked in a way. And due to that blowing up, what we see is that Cooper's on the outside of the spaceship, the Event Horizon, trying to do repairs
Yeah.
to the spaceship and to their own ship as well, so they can escape. And then in the explosion, and he's kind of the only one who brings any kind of element of comedy with his one-liners. Cooper, he's floating away in space on a bit of debris
Yeah.
away from the Event Horizon.
I know. See, for me,
I didn't like the jokes.
it was a negative. Normally, where it can be a positive, like in a buddy cop film or something, I think
Yeah,
I can understand that you might want a bit of after what's just happened, you might want a bit of comedy. But if you the way this was done was completely wrong. The way you went, oh god, I can't believe this. Well, yeah, like doing a little commentary to himself. Where I'm not being funny, given the situation. No, I don't think most people probably wouldn't be saying that. Yeah. And then the
no,
way he went, "I'm coming to get you, motherfucker." Well, the way he said it,
yeah,
I nearly did a 6 to you because it really took me out of the film. I know we suspending our disbelief, and for a lot of films we watch for escapism,
yeah.
But the rule the universe it put in was something that at the time I was invested in, and this really it was a bit like when you have a dream and you get a slap round the face and wake up when you think, oh no, I was dreaming, and someone wakes you up and you're having a good dream, I felt
Yeah,
exactly
the timing
that's
wasn't
exactly
good.
how I
It just
felt.
wasn't needed.
No, that's exactly how I
Yeah,
felt. It was like a slap in the face for me, just that bit.
and through the whole film, you've not had, and it's not a negative at all, but you've not had any humor at all from any of the characters. It's very tense, very fast paced. It's quite serious. They're dealing with a serious issue, and then all of a sudden you've got Cooper floating through space to his death, and he starts making kind of one-liner jokes, very much like the Wines brothers do in their
Oh,
the shocking films they make, and it just wasn't good timing. Maybe in another scene, for a bit of irony, they could have got away with it, but in this particular scene, this particular moment, after what's just happened, it just wasn't needed whatsoever. I mean, Sean Pertwee's character has just died,
yeah, I mean, I can
and
understand
then
the
they start
theory on
doing
it.
jokes.
Something horrible has happened. Let's lighten up the tension a bit. But I don't know.
Yeah,
The way it was done, I don't know a better way of doing it personally. But yeah, you're right. It was just crap. Let's say.
yeah, and then it goes from kind of jokes which aren't necessary to DJ being in the medical bay, and again he's alone. I'm such a pussy. I just want to be alone on this ship anywhere, even having a pony, having a poo. I wouldn't want to be left alone. And he's in the medical bay, and Fishburne says that Sam Neill's character's out, Dr. Weir's out. You've got to be careful. And instantly he says, "Don't worry about it. I can look after him, and I'll take care of him if I see him." That you see Sam Neill's character, Dr. Weir, grabs Jason Isaacs' character, DJ, by the throat
Yeah.
and starts throwing him around. And what happens to him? Again, this scene was cut a lot. He's put on one of the the tables in the medical bay, and you just see Sam Neill's hand picking up various scalpels and knives and things like that. And Jason Isaacs' face, kind of shock and horror and pain. And then Lawrence Fishburne goes to look for him, and he finds that he's been hung by hooks, very much like Hellraiser, above the table in the medical bay, and causing all his intestines, all his innards to fall out and just remain on the medical table. It's really horrific scene, isn't it? It's awful.
It's like something out of Hostel, isn't it? That bit.
Yeah, and so it's so much so that Jason Isaacs wanted to buy that item. He wanted it afterwards because it was such a memorable scene, and they said that he couldn't have it in case it's used in another film. And he said, "Well, how many other horror films or sci-fi films are going to want a Jason Isaacs like latex doll with his innards ripped out?" And they wouldn't let him have it. I thought that was quite funny, but yeah, it's just awful. And again, the fact that they went into more detail about him being opened up and his innards being removed, it would have been, the director's cut would have been so good on this film. It's such a shame that no one will ever get to see it.
Yeah, and that is a massive shame. I mean, this film, and I think you could argue it is now, but it's definitely not. I think a cult classic, almost, or getting to that. Getting there now anyway. to that point. And I think it's one of those films I don't have any stats or facts for this, but I think it's one of those films that probably did a lot better with regards to renting and people buying the DVD and stuff, and even now and renting it, than it probably did in the cinema because of word of mouth, etc.
Millions and millions at home video.
Yeah.
It really, really did. So Fishburne is obviously trying to evacuate, and he's trying to find Sam Neill's character, and in doing so, he finds Doctor or Lieutenant Stark, Jodie Richardson's, and in the bridge, that again they come across Sam Neill, who's sitting in the captain's seat, and he discovers that his eyes have been removed, and again the dialogue here is just so good. When he says, "What have you done to yourself? Why are your eyes missing?" He says, "Well, we're going. We don't need eyes. I discovered a dimension of pure evil and chaos."
Yes.
And just the way he says it, you really believe that whatever is out there is, for once, which doesn't really often happen in films, is just so evil you can't comprehend or even picture in your mind, apart from seeing pictures which they flash up on the screen in just mere seconds of what is really facing them and what is on the other side of that wall, which is so horrific. And I love that, the fact that you can't even really leave it to your imagination because it is that bad. And I think that's brilliant, and it's said so well. The lines are delivered brilliantly by a lot of people in this film, but when they're talking about the evil and the look on Sam Neill's face with no eyes, so obviously he can't use any expression at all. It's just the way he says it is brilliant. I think it's great, and it leaves you kind of with goosebumps.
Disturbed. Yeah.
Yeah, it really, really does. So, and from that, Hooper, our favourite comedian at the moment, he reappears on the outside of the spaceship, having kind of used his jetpack on the oxygen to blow himself back to the event horizon, which we find out is a complete waste of time. And Sam Neill fires like a harpoon at the window, which then decompresses it, or does it compress it? I never know which one it is.
It's not a good thing. I know that.
And everything gets sucked out of the bridge, and including Sam Neill's character, which Dr. Weir, which I was really surprised about, because having had such a build-up in this, that for him to just get blown out into space, or sucked off, that I was really surprised. Were you surprised he was sucked off? What?
We must have been watching two very different films at this point, Stu. Was I surprised?
Bridge. I don't know why you found that funny. I'm trying to describe a tense moment in the film, and
I'm immature. I'm immature.
What did you think of that? What was going through your mind then?
What was going? Well, completely something different to what it is now. I can assure you. What was going? Well, it was ultimately what it was going back to the fact that I thought everyone's going to die. It was just a case of how each person's going to end, going to get it. And
did you ever think in this film Sam Neill would be sucked off at all?
No, I did not think the man from Jurassic Park would be sucked off. That's all I know about the guy from Jurassic Park. But yeah,
exactly.
No, and we think that's the end of him.
It was a way to go.
Pardon?
It was a quick way to go, really, wasn't it? For all that build-up and the sinister
being sucked off.
The role he played. Yeah, you're just being dirty now, aren't you? You've been filthy.
You started this.
So, and again, whether it's due to the lack of character arc in this, Cooper dies, and you just don't care, do you?
He doesn't die, does he?
Does he die?
No, he's at the end of the film, isn't he? They find him at the end.
I
think he dies.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Which,
I was wishful thinking.
But I wouldn't have minded it.
Chamber,
yeah. I preferred Isaac's character. I wanted him to live, but no.
Yeah,
and interestingly, a point you mentioned, obviously, about things being cut and things. Jason Isaac's death scene. I know you obviously played in it, but apparently in one of the shots he's meant to be still alive, and then Lawrence Fishburne's character shoots him in the head. You're right.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've literally got the the IMDb facts. Cause what prompted me, I thought, okay. So I scrolled down and because I'm sure I remember seeing more about that particular scene. Yeah, which I think would have worked a lot better. And it just shows you what the director's cut could have done. You know, because him
Well,
still
they're
being
really
alive and
been-
seeing that, and then Fishburne killing him, also says a lot more about that scene, doesn't it? It adds so much more weight. But there we go.
Yeah, that would have played out so much better. The fact that he has gone through so much pain, and Fishburne has to then kill, even though he's going to die anyway, kill one of his own crew. That would have played out so much better.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. But as you rightly corrected me, Cooper then appears in one of the airlocks. He's managed to get around,
Which is a shame.
which is a shame. Yeah, yeah. And that's after Fishburne has saved Richardson from also being sucked out of the spaceship, which kind of goes back to the fact that earlier on he mentions that one of his crew died and he had to go and leave without him, that he makes a point of that he's not going to leave her in this room to die, and he risks himself to save her, which was quite a nice touch. So they decide to blow the corridor, which will separate the ship, and they can escape in the lifeboat, which is the other end of the ship. But when Fishburne decides to go alone to prep all the explosive, you pretty much know he's going to die, don't you? Or did you not think that?
Yeah, I did. To be honest, I thought he's done that. The minute he made that choice, he knew he was kind of like making a sacrifice to save the rest of the crew.
Because it was kind of, for his character, it was all about like redemption, wasn't it? The fact that he left his crewmate, even though he had no choice. His crewmate, he says that he was burning alive, and that he had no choice. It was either everyone dies or he has to leave this crewmate. So his character is more of redemption than anything else. And whilst he's heading off to prep the explosives, again, you get callbacks to so many different films, and you get the blood scene, where I don't know where this blood actually comes from, but Cooper sees all this blood from appearing above him, and him and Jolie Richardson get covered in blood.
Yeah,
and it was really, really clever the way they did this, because when he looks up at this light, it's got this long corridor of lights. There's one single light that goes all the way along, and you see this liquid going across. And because it would have taken so much time and very difficult to actually put that much liquid, what they did was cut out a shape that was kind of looked like liquid being poured down the light, and they put it on a piece of string and they just pulled it above him.
Oh, okay.
So it looked like the whole light's been filled up.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah, which was quite clever. So whilst they're trying to deal with that, Fishburne then again goes to the orb, and he's kind of, by situations that he's faced, it's almost as if he's placed there by the ship, isn't it? Because there is explosions, and he runs.
He had to run down the corridor, which was nicknamed the meat grinder, supposedly. Which that thing that separates the gravity drive from the rest of the ship. Apparently, it's meant to represent. I'm looking on here. The 9 circles of hell from Dante's poem Inferno.
There you go. There's so many references, aren't there?
Yeah, and as we saw in the documentary, none of the actors could run the whole corridor, because quite rightly, it would make you feel really uneasy. I mean, I've been to the fairground that have these like crazy houses, and they have these kind of rooms, and it's really, really unnerving.
Yeah, they've got that. I made a real cock of myself, which isn't kind of unusual for me. I went to the London Dungeons, and it was when better half we were first married.
Okay.
And you walk through that corridor that spins round, or he's got the same illusion, hasn't it?
Yeah, and they also happened at Thorpe Park when they originally had the first version of the No Way Out roller coaster in the dark that goes backwards. They had a massive. It's
awful.
It's not, but it's not. Yeah, it's this corridor. Essentially for the actors, it's 30 foot long.
I walked down there and fell over it.
I wouldn't even. Did you?
Yeah, I did. It was real good first impressions after just being married. Let's go down here. This is really great. And I went down there and fell over.
I like the London Dungeons. I mean, would you take your oldest to it?
I
think
probably take my eldest to it.
11 or 12,
I
ideally.
think it's just about 12. Yeah. But my youngest, if I never wanted him to sleep, I'd take him. So.
Okay.
Because the Jack the Ripper walk is really horrific, isn't it?
Yes.
It's brilliant. It really is set with so much atmosphere. It's great.
It is. I really love the London Dungeon. It's brilliant.
Yeah, anyone who ever comes to London from anywhere, you go to London Dungeons. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
really is.
It's now moved to next to the London Aquarium.
Oh, was it
Yeah,
really?
because it used to be at London Bridge, didn't it?
It did indeed, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. They've changed a few bits, but there we go.
There you go. Facts from James about London.
Absolutely.
So Fishburne's at the oar, but he's at this kind of this part of the ship where the demons are, and it's quite interesting because he sees his colleague on fire again walking across the water. And he looks at him and he says, "You're not real." He says, "This doesn't happen." And when he says that, he disappears, but the burning character turns into Sam Neill, who it's just absolutely amazing makeup. He's naked from head to foot. Obviously, you don't see his winky, but he's covered in these various scars, which are kind of just random. They don't actually set any pattern, which was done on purpose by the makeup artist because they didn't want people to try and read too much into it and give any other message out.
No.
But he's covered. He's got no hair. And he's covered in blood with scars around his body, and he kind of did 8 hours of makeup, taking it on, and it was about, I think it was 7 hours of removing all of this latex all over his body, which was applied when he was naked. And it just looks amazing. It looks absolutely horrific, doesn't it?
It does. Absolutely.
It's really, really scary. When I post this out, I'll attach a photograph of Sam Neill, just how he looks. It really does look quite impressive. And he says he has kind of a conversation with Lawrence Fishburne's character about the fact that where he's going and what he's going to experience is going to be absolutely horrific, and that all the other crew are going to be sacrificed as well. And
Yeah, they belong to the ship, etc.
Yeah, and it's just done so well. And Sam Neill, I just couldn't ever picture him from seeing him in various other films, as you say, like in Jurassic Park, to being this character who looks so fucking freaky that of what he looks like now, that Lawrence Fishburne manages to get the detonator and he explodes the ship. The ship blows up. The corridor does, doesn't it?
No, you're right. But this whole scene, I think, was both really good and really bad. I know that sounds almost like I'm purposely contradicting myself. The makeup was amazing. Obviously the way Sam Neill was explaining it was amazing. The one thing that I felt this scene didn't need, and it ended up being a negative, is I honestly felt there was no need for a proper fight. It was kind of like a James Bond Captain Kirk kind of moment at the end of, Captain Kirk at the end of the Star Trek episode where he's got to fight the bad guy. And kind of win almost against the odds. And I honestly felt we did not need that. I know he had to get the detonator somehow, yeah, but I honestly felt we didn't need that a couple of minutes. It felt like of like punching and stuff around, showing how strong Sam Neill was. Dr. Weird's character. I honestly felt that for me that was the actual fight bit was a negative, and it was kind of like a blot on what was. Other than that, once you take that away, a really really good scene.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I thought it was a. It kind of didn't bother me too much, but it was a pointless fight because he'd seen Sam Neill float out into space. So obviously that character in front of him wasn't really Dr. Weir. So I don't know kind of what it was and why he was trying to fight it. But as you say, it just led to the necessity of him having a detonator, wasn't it? Really?
But I think they could have come up with a better way.
Scene.
But yeah.
Yeah, you could have done it. Well, I suppose any other way you'd have done it. The idea is you would have got from other films. It would have been a bit tropey, but
maybe.
Yeah, it seemed a bit pointless. But he did blow up the corridor, which kind of left. It's quite interesting because it didn't actually kill Sam Neill's character, and it didn't kill Lawrence Fishburne, did it?
No, they went to hell. We're assuming.
Yeah, which kind of when I only noticed that. Maybe because I'm a bit slow today when I watched it for the second time.
The way the ship disappears in a black hole rather than...
Yeah, because you see a ship blow up and then you see Stark and Hooper looking out the window and kind of the remaining part of the ship where Fishburne and Sam Neill is, it's as if it kind of lightning hits it and then a massive hole opens up and the ship just vanishes. So yeah... Sadly and regrettably for Lawrence Fishburne's character, for eternity, he's going to be tortured in hell.
Yes.
Which isn't too nice.
No.
And from there, it goes 72 days later. And I like the end of this film. I thought it kind of left it open, really, that they are rescued very much kind of in the style of Alien at the end of it.
Mm.
Where there's Cooper, Justin, who's kind of alive, and Stark. When Jolie Richardson's character, she comes out of like hypersleep and she's on the floor, and you see these rescue characters on with their helmets. And he kind of picks her up and says, "Don't worry, you're okay. You're okay. We're here to help you." And when he lifts his visor up, it's Sam Neill's face.
Oh, I thought
Again,
that was really good, initially.
yeah, I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And I was kind of expecting it because the visor was blacked out and you didn't see the face.
No, but no.
And then it ended. And it kind of left it open. And I was wondering, was this a vision from her?
Well, for me,
something...
no, it didn't end then, because then she woke up and then the actual team were there.
Yeah.
Saying, calm her down, calm her down. That's when it ended.
Was it a dream, or
I don't know.
What do you think happened?
Well, I think it's up to the as far as I think it's one of those things, because we know there's probably not going to be a sequel to it anytime soon. I think it's which is a shame in a way. Which is it's one of those it's one of those things I think which is left open to the audience. And for me, I just thought it was a dream. But the only reason why, because it was the other part of the ship that went to hell.
But she never saw Sam Neill's face when it was all scarred up.
No.
So
I didn't really think about that.
How could she see Sam Neill's face like that? Because
yeah, no, you're right.
she never saw it originally.
I'd almost rather them have done that to Lawrence Fishburne's character. He sometimes get rescued, and then it'd be Sam Neill. Then he's in hell. Then ending rather than, because I think that would have been a bit more not left to the audience. You kind of like would have almost automatically said, "Well, they're in hell." Yeah, that's quite interesting. But it's are they in hell? Because if they were in hell, it just didn't make sense to me, because the way it was very obvious that the gravity, the part of the ship where Sam Neill and Lawrence Fishburne character disappeared, and where you suspect. So for me, I think it was a dream. But yeah, you raised an interesting point. I can't argue that. The fact that for me, that just confuses things rather than anything else. I mean, what did you feel?
I don't know, because again, the first time I saw it, I thought it was a dream sequence. It was only when I watched it today to take notes on it that I kind of thought about it a lot more on the second viewing, and I thought, well, how can you dream about something
you haven't seen
that you've never actually witnessed?
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, but again, you clearly saw, and they made sure you see the black hole open up, and the ship's core drive actually go into the black hole. So I don't know. It kind of added a bit more confusion. If it was Sam Neill's face without any eyes, and you think, well, yeah, it's a dream. She's just freaking out. But I don't know. It can't be, because there's no. I don't know. It's really difficult to tell. It's really confusing. It made the ending a bit confusing. It didn't ruin it at all.
No.
Because you won't watch it and think about it as deeply as we do, probably. But I just thought it was. Yeah, it was one last fucking jump scare, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. To end the film, I didn't like the credit music. That upset me. But there we go.
Yeah, well, he wanted Orbital to do the music for this, but Paramount didn't want some group who'd never been heard of to do the music. So I thought some of the music was pretty
Paramount
good. But yeah,
know best, apparently.
Yeah, Paramount. Yeah, Orbital, who are well famous. Yeah, back in the 90s. Yeah, they knew nothing. But yeah, so how would you score the film? How would you rate it? Would you recommend it?
See, I was going to give it a 3.5. But looking at it, I'll probably end up giving it 4, simply because I really enjoyed the film, and I think in relation to the budget they had, when you look at the 10 months they had, I think they made. Even hadn't I known that, I think I would have given it 4. But I think that it was such a good overall type acting with basically a few niggles that I'd only really noticed it properly on the second and the 0.5 on the second or third time of actually watching it. And it's the first time I watched this film was about 6 months ago, funnily enough. I hadn't seen it before.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And which is why I think I'll give it a 4, because I thought it was really, really good. It was really good with just a few niggles and like as I mentioned, like the fight scene at the end, a couple of the tribute characters, the fact that I felt some of the characters you didn't really care about. The two main ones, played by Jurassic Park guy and a pre-Matrix Morpheus, I thought were really good. I mean, they were the best for me. They were the best characters in the film, along with obviously Sean Pertwee, who we didn't spend much time with. But I think what Sean Pertwee did with the limited time we had with him was fantastic. Those three I felt were the crux of the film, and Isaac was quite close there, but the others I didn't really care too much about. So I've explained obviously the worst bits, and I think the best bit was it was quite an original idea. It would have been so easy, as you mentioned, to just do another Alien film, which once again the first half obviously compared to it, and I thought it was quite brave to do a kind of like The Shining Amityville horror in space, which was which felt original as well when I watched it.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I really, really enjoyed this film, and I didn't get bored watching it on the second time. I noticed a hell of a lot more. I'd give it a really solid 4. I think it's just such a shame that due to circumstances, and as I said earlier at the start of the pod, that being a new director, that he felt obliged to listen to Paramount and do what they say for future opportunities purposes, that there wasn't the director's cut straight after, because I think that will be even better. I think it'll be absolutely brilliant. But for the budget, for the time, the fantastic cast they had for this, and he brought a lot of people in from who are on the Aliens project as well. He had some really, really good advisors around with him. I thought the film was absolutely brilliant. I think the best bits is just the scene, the storyline's brilliant. I think the special effects are amazing. I just think the atmosphere of the film, where it's really creepy, a lot of it's very psychological. I think that's absolutely brilliant. It's so fast paced as well. I think the negatives are very, very small negatives, such as like the fight scene, which is kind of not needed. The silly one-liners whilst floating around in space, but because of the film is so quick, so intense, I think you can easily kind of overlook or forget about those scenes. And I just think it's just brilliant. And some of the special effects, it has dated, but this film in itself as a story and a plot hasn't dated at all, and I think it really, really holds together. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, I know obviously we've ripped it apart and we have kind of talked about the whole film and then know what's going to happen, but it's still really, really worth watching.
Yeah, definitely.
I totally recommend this to anyone who likes it's not really a science fiction, so you can't even say it's a sci-fi film. It's as you said earlier, it's a gothic horror film that just happens to be set in space.
Yeah, definitely.
So that is Event Horizon. And what we're doing now is another bonus podcast because we're wonderful people. But we are going to talk about, don't do Flarrow anymore because they all disappointed us.
Oh.
But we are going from DC to Marvel. In a couple of days' time, we will be talking about The Defenders on Netflix.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that conversation because it's something that I ultimately like with a few. I ultimately really enjoyed it with a few very strong negatives.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to that because on our last pod, which I can't even remember what it was, what we last reviewed. What was it we last spoke about? Was it SWAT when we reviewed SWAT?
Karate Kid is the last one we've done. Which
Kid.
Which by the time you hear this, you would have heard because it's the next one to go up. But yes,
exactly. On the end of Karate Kid, you said that there were a lot of things you really liked about this, but on the same kind of feeling that you disliked. We've not spoken about this whatsoever, so I'll be getting your feelings kind of on the pod as we record it, which I always like because we're bound to disagree on a lot of it.
Well, I'd probably say
really, really good.
I think we kind of have like most films. We have like it's normally like 70-30, where the 70% we agree, and the 30% we normally disagree on certain things. Very rarely, I think we'll be completely opposed until, for example, we do Big Trouble in Little China. But there we go.
Well, and the next one, which must be coming up very, very soon, Harry Potter.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. The problem is the minute that's announced on Twitter, Stu, you're going to be in the minority. You are going to be the
Well,
Donald Trump of the Harry
well,
Potter review.
the week before we do Harry Potter, I will put another poll out about who likes Harry Potter. Is it a good film? Yes or no? That's all I'm going to ask on Twitter, and just see how many people reply. It'll be quite interesting to find out. But I already know 100% of one of the characters you are just not going to like, because when we watched a previous series
Yes.
that I enjoyed and a lot of people loathed and they really didn't like it, but I seem to be really in the minority on this one. So it's going to be really, really interesting to find out how this man affected your views of the Defenders, and because we will disagree on that a lot.
Okay. This
It'll be really, really good.
It will be. He will be. Hopefully, we're still friends afterwards.
I'm sure he will be, because I want to kill Harry Potter. So yeah, we'll have to discuss when we'll do Harry Potter, and on the End of Defenders podcast, we'll let you guys know of what film we're going to be either praising, cursing, but definitely reviewing next on the Film Reel cast.
Oh, there we go. Okay. See you next time, guys.